The highway was a ribbon of silver under the winter moon, empty except for Daniel's ambulance humming steadily through the fog. He was driving back from a late call, bone-tired but calm, wrapped in the familiar quiet that always followed a long night. Snow drifted across the asphalt in thin veils, dissolving against the windshield. He preferred it this way. Silence, distance, nothing to demand more of him than steady hands and a steady heart. After losing his wife 3 winters ago, stillness was the only thing that didn't hurt. Then the darkness ahead shifted. At first, Daniel thought it was a fallen tree or debris from the storm. But the shape moved. Slow, deliberate. He eased his foot onto the brake. The ambulance tires groaned against the cold road until the vehicle slid to a stop. Daniel leaned forward, squinting past the glare of his headlights. A horse stood in the center of the highway, motionless except for the white clouds of breath rising from its nostrils. Its coat, dark and dusted with frost, shimmered like something carved from the night itself. Daniel stepped out, the cold biting straight through his uniform. The horse didn't bolt. It didn't flinch. Instead, it watched it with eyes that held not wildness but a startling, pleading clarity. Something in its stillness unnerved him. Animals ran from danger. They did not flag down ambulances. He lifted his hand slowly. "Easy," he murmured, voice carrying in the frozen air. The horse's ears flicked forward. It took a single step back, then stopped, gaze never leaving him. When Daniel stepped closer, it retreated again, not fleeing, almost guiding. A faint tremor of instinct tugged at him. For reasons he couldn't explain, Daniel felt certain the horse wanted him to follow. He grabbed his flashlight from the side compartment and crossed the yellow lines, boots crunching over brittle frost. The horse turned and walked toward the tree line, pausing whenever Daniel slowed, as if making sure he understood. The woods beyond the road were silent, the kind of silence that swallowed sound before it could echo. When his light passed over the underbrush, something pale glimmered in the hollow between 2 fallen logs. Daniel froze. The horse stopped beside him, lowering its head toward the shape. He stepped closer and knelt. A small body lay curled in the snow, a newborn foal, its thin sides rising in weak, unsteady breaths. Its coat was still slick, clinging to its trembling frame. One tiny hoof scraped helplessly at the ice. It was losing heat fast. Daniel's pulse tightened. No mother in sight. No sound except the shallow rasp of the foal, trying to live. The stallion nudged Daniel's shoulder with sudden urgency. And in that moment, beneath the dim stars and frozen quiet, Daniel understood. This horse had stopped the highway for him. The foal needed saving. He was the only one here to do it. Daniel slipped his arms beneath the trembling foal, startled by how little it weighed. Its skin felt icy, its heartbeat faint and irregular beneath his fingertips. The snow around it had begun to melt from its failing warmth, forming a shallow cradle of slush. He wrapped his coat tighter around the small body, shielding it from a wind that cut through the trees like a blade. The foal let out a fragile sound, half gasp, half plea, that stung something deep in him he had spent years refusing to feel. The stallion stepped closer, breath fogging in hurried bursts. His muscles quivered, not from cold but from the strain of fear. Daniel lifted the foal carefully, rising to his feet with deliberate steadiness. He met the stallion's gaze, surprised by the sharp intelligence in those dark eyes. "I'm taking him to the ambulance," he whispered, unsure why he felt compelled to speak. The stallion did not move to block him. Instead, it swung its head toward the road, urging him on. Daniel carried the foal back through the brush, each step slow to keep balance on the uneven ground. His boots sank into patches of loose snow, but he held the small body close, trying to share whatever warmth he could. Memories flickered unbidden. His wife's weakening breaths, the helplessness that had carved its home in his chest. He had failed once when it mattered most. Tonight, he refused to fail again. Reaching the ambulance, he eased the foal onto a folded thermal blanket on the stretcher. The interior lights cast a soft glow over its fragile frame, illuminating the steam rising from a melting ice on its coat. Daniel covered it with another blanket, rubbing its neck gently to stimulate circulation. The foal's breath hitched, then steadied, though barely. The stallion appeared behind him, hooves clattering softly on the asphalt. He stood at the open doors, eyes fixed on the foal, with an aching devotion that made Daniel swallow hard. "She should be here," Daniel muttered, scanning the darkness beyond the trees. A newborn shouldn't be alone. Something must have happened to the mare. He grabbed his flashlight again, following a path the stallion indicated with a tilt of his head. Only a few yards off the highway, Daniel found the mare collapsed beside a cluster of winter bear shrubs. Her sides rose shallowly. Each breath was a struggle. He knelt beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her neck. The pulse was weak, far too weak. Bruising along her flank told a simple, brutal story. She'd been struck by a vehicle that had never stopped. The mare turned her head fractionally toward him, eyes clouded with pain. Daniel rested a hand on her warm cheek. "I have your baby," he whispered. "He's alive." The stallion moved to her side, lowering his head to hers with a tremor of recognition and grief. Daniel stood slowly, breath unsteady. The mare wasn't going to make it, but the foal still could. Daniel lifted the foal back into the ambulance, feeling the stallion's presence close behind him like a shadow stitched from worry. The heater hummed softly, filling the cabin with warm air that curled around the blankets. The foal shivered under the thermal layers, but its breaths held a fragile rhythm, uncertain, yet still fighting. Daniel checked its pulse again, relieved to find a steadier beat beneath his fingertips. "Stay with me," he murmured, his voice low and honest, as if the newborn understood the plea. He closed the doors gently, leaving them slightly ajar so the stallion could see inside. The horse stood inches from the step, refusing to be moved by the cold or the dark. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat and turned on the hazard lights, the blinking amber casting soft pulses across the snow-laced road. When he began to drive, he kept the speed slow, careful not to jostle the foal. In the side mirror, he saw the stallion break into a steady trot, following alongside the ambulance as though tethered by invisible thread. The sight tightened something in Daniel's chest. Loyalty like that was rare, painfully, achingly rare. He had known devotion once, and the memory still lived in the corners of his grief. But this horse's determination felt like a reminder of something he had forgotten. That love, even broken, did not simply die. The rescue ranch came into view several minutes later, a cluster of low barns glowing under porch lights. Daniel parked near the entrance and hurried to the back. The stallion arrived moments after, breath heaving, steam rising from his coat. Daniel eased the foal into his arms again and carried it toward the main barn, where a woman emerged from the doorway pulling on gloves. May Wynn took one look at the bundle in Daniel's arms and motioned him inside, without a word. She was calm, her movements practiced, her eyes sharp with a depth that suggested she had weathered her own storms. Together they laid the foal beneath a heat lamp, adding layers of blankets and rubbing its limbs to coax circulation. May checked its temperature, her brow furrowing. Another hour out there, and he wouldn't have made it. Daniel sank onto a stool, watching the tiny chest rise and fall. His hands trembled from adrenaline fading into exhaustion. "A stallion led me to him," he said quietly. "He wouldn't leave until I followed." May glanced toward the open barn doors, where the stallion stood just outside the threshold, unmoving. "That's not common," she murmured. "He trusts you. He's asking you to stay." Daniel exhaled slowly, his gaze drifting back to the foal curled under the warm light. For the first time in years, the weight in his chest eased, not gone but shifting, making room for something fragile and uncertain. The foal let out a soft, wavering sigh. Daniel leaned forward, realizing the truth settling quietly inside him. Tonight wasn't over yet, and neither was he. Dawn seeped gently into the barn, turning the frost on the windows into sheets of pale gold. Daniel stood beside the foal's pen, arms folded, watching its small chest rise with steadier breaths. The night had carved exhaustion deep into him, yet he felt curiously alert, as though something inside had been rewound and set moving again. May stepped quietly to his side, holding a worn leather pouch she'd taken from the mare before sunrise. Her expression was soft but shadowed. "I think this belongs to whoever loved her," she said. Daniel opened the pouch carefully. Inside lay a single photograph, an older boy hugging the mare's neck, his smile bright with a trust untouched by grief. Folded behind it was a note, edges frayed, ink blurred in places by time or weather. He read it silently, If she finds her way home, care for her. She has carried more than most hearts can bear. The words pressed into him with unexpected weight. This mare had not been lost. She had been searching, perhaps for years, guided only by memory and instinct. He handed the note back to May, his throat tight. She wasn't just wandering, he said. She was trying to keep her family together. May nodded, her gaze drifting toward the stallion waiting just outside the stall. He stood motionless, watching the foal with an unfaltering devotion that felt almost human. Loss had hollowed a space inside him, too, and yet he continued to stand, to guard, to hope. Daniel stepped toward the stallion, stopping just within reach. "You did everything you could," he whispered, unsure when his voice had become so gentle. The stallion lowered his head until his muzzle brushed Daniel's shoulder. No fear, no hesitation, just quiet understanding. Daniel rested a hand against the horse's warm neck, feeling a thread of connection he hadn't known he needed. The foal stirred, lifting its head for the first time with a flicker of strength. May moved quickly, checking its temperature and murmuring approval. Daniel returned to the pen, kneeling as the newborn wobbled unsteadily onto its legs. The sight was small, simple, and yet it hit him with the force of a new beginning. "There you go," he said softly, steadying it with one hand. "One step at a time." May watched him with a look that held gratitude and something quieter, recognition. Daniel realized he had not felt seen like this in years. "You should stay," she said, "at least until they're both ready." He knew she meant the stallion and the foal, but something in her tone suggested her meaning reached further. Daniel exhaled, the decision settling before he could question it. He wasn't ready to leave. Not them, not this place, not this fragile new rhythm that felt like healing. The foal pressed gently against his leg. The stallion released a low, relieved breath, and for the first time since losing his wife, Daniel felt the unmistakable warmth of a life beginning again.